Salvete! It is I, your Magister, back here again to continue our lovely lesson about calendars. Now, just as a quick reminder, remember the early Roman calendar was a lunar calendar. The calendars of both Romulus and Numa reflected this idea, even though the calendar of Romulus was 304 days, with random days of winter just stuck on the calendar somewhere that really weren't months. And the calendar of Numa, which as I was pointed out to me was 355 days, which still leaves a few days short. Now, enter this man. This is Gaius Julius Caesar, or as we would more commonly know him, Julius Caesar. No relation to the salad, which is still darn tasty, by the way. Caesar, among the many things he did, was to reform the calendar yet again. Now, during his time as general/dictator of Rome, Caesar began hanging out with young Cleopatra, who was about 25 to 30 years his junior, but it worked out apparently for them in any case. And he learned one thing from Cleopatra, which was that the Egyptians used a solar calendar. The Egyptians had calculated the solar calendar out to 365 and 1/4 days comprising a year, which is exactly what we have now. The Egyptians also coincidentally had calculated that the Earth was round. This was like several thousand years before Columbus. And the size of the Earth within 1,000 miles of its actual diameter, which is pretty darn good considering they just use sticks and shadows and looking at the sun and the location of stuff. But I digress. In any case, Caesar thought this made much more sense, so he forced Rome to adopt the solar calendar of the Egyptians. Yet another thing that they didn't like about him, but that's another story for another matter. He also rearranged the days and the months and changed the month of Quintilius, the 5th month, into Julius, July, named after himself. Now, later on, his son, nephew, etc., Augustus, the first emperor, who was really Octavian, by the way, Augustus is his title, changed and finalized the numbering system of the calendar to what we have more or less today, and changed Sextilius to August in honor of himself, also making it 31 days, because heck, he's the emperor, he should have 31 days. And we have the calendar that we look at and use now. At some point in time during the late Republic, the Romans decided to shift the beginning of the year from Martius to Januarius. So Januarius became the first month like we have now in January. Now this later on shifted back again some point in time, either in the late stages of the empire or early in what we would call the Dark Ages, to where April was the first month of the year. And when that got shifted back to being January again, because it just made more sense, the people who didn't accept it were known as April Fools. Just a little bit of odd trivia there for you. Now, this is actually how the years that we understand got finalized. So this is what they would look like. But the years themselves, this one is really weird. Early Roman calendars didn't have years like we understand them. Their years were named after important people. So if some historian decided that he felt that it should be known as the year of Babius Maximus, Big Bob, they would call it the year of Babius Maximus. And if other people agreed, they might have multiple years of Babius Maximus. Now the problem would come along with, what if another historian thought that Big Bob was Idius Maximus, big jerk, idiot, and so he decided to call it something else. You have two different accounts of the same year with different names. Now, this proves to be very tricky and complicated if one of those accounts gets lost, and so you're not quite sure what year you're looking at. Or even worse, if they find both of them simultaneously and they think that there's different things going on. Modern history measures Roman years according to an idea that was adopted later, during the late Republic, early Imperial era. And that is using the reckoning system of AUC, Ab Urbe Condita, the year of the city. One of the few dates that you will be required to remember is April the 23rd of 753 BC. That is traditionally the date that is ascribed to the foundation of Rome. Now, again, because of the weird way that the calendars were set up, April 23rd was what they may have reckoned it at, but that was using their weird system of counting based on the idus and the calende, etc., etc., etc. So we're simply going by what tradition dictates. Now, just as a clarification for all of you who may not necessarily be sure how this works, modern calendar systems use two forms of dating. The first is BC, before Christ, or as it is sometimes called now, BCE, before the Common or Christian era, We don't ascribe to political correctness. That's just a load of bunk. So it's BC or BCE, before the Christian era or before Christian reckoning. And AD, Anno Domini, the year of the Lord, which is based on the concept of Christ being born and starting that as the year zero. The problem with that is that the calendars or the system used to reckon our AD and BC were also slightly off. So technically speaking, the birth of Christ took place somewhere between the year 4 and 2 BC. That's really confusing, but he's God, he can do what he wants. Now, so 753 BC, remember that for BC, we count backwards going up. So 753 would be followed by 752, 751. Yeah, there's a little bouncing light bulb, but that's just what it is. Then when we hit 0, then we just start counting up normally. So that's how that goes. So remember, though, when you're looking back at old Roman history, you're trying to reconcile dates using a calendar system where the years were named after people, not a date. That was later replaced by AUC, the year of the city, during the time of these two gentlemen, Julius and Octavius Caesar. Wale.